My name is Samantha Vasquez. I'm 28, and lately I've finally started to understand what people mean when they say you can't choose your family. I didn't grow up thinking this way. I used to believe we were decent, not perfect, but stitched together well enough to pass for functional. We were the kind of family that posed nicely for Christmas cards, even if someone had cried in the bathroom 10 minutes before the photo. Mom was the classic helicopter parent, but not over me, never me. She hovered over my younger brother Landon, 2 years younger, like he was the sun warming her whole world, and the rest of us were just lucky planets caught in his orbit. Landon was dramatic, impulsive, a human firework in a house full of sparklers, the kind of person who ran out of gas 3 times in a week, because life's too short to stare at fuel gauges. Dad was quieter, more practical. The type who fixed broken things with duct tape and left long silences at dinner unless something absolutely required words. And me, I was the reliable one, the easy one. The daughter who didn't ask for much, didn't need much, didn't make trouble because trouble always had a name in our house, and that name was Landon. He'd call Mom at 3 a.m. because he accidentally bought furniture he couldn't afford, or because he wasn't feeling emotionally safe driving home from a bar, or because he forgot tuition deadlines, bills, everything. And Mom always picked up, always rushed in, always defended him. He's just sensitive, she'd say. He's under so much pressure. Meanwhile, I paid my own way through trade school. I worked part-time jobs. I never asked for anything. I visited every weekend without needing help. And looking back, that was probably my mistake. In my family, silence was taken as agreement. Reliability just meant I'd always be there to clean up the messes no one wanted to admit existed. Still, I tried not to resent him. I tried to love Landon the way an older sister should from a slight distance, but with a safety net ready if he needed it. Not that he needed it often from me. Mom had already ensured she was his first call, his always call. But every now and then I'd get the text, "Sam, I'm so screwed," and like clockwork I'd show up. 3 years ago, he accidentally put a down payment on a car he couldn't afford. He begged me for $2,000 to avoid repossession. He promised he'd pay me back by Christmas. That was 2 Christmases ago. He never paid, never even pretended to. Whenever I brought it up, he'd laugh like it was a joke or mumble something about Venmoing me soon. Mom would intervene every time. "He's your brother, Samantha. Don't be petty." As if financial amnesia was a chronic condition he couldn't help having. So yeah, maybe I was already on edge when I got that text from Mom last week. "Hey, sweetie, just letting you know we're doing a small private engagement dinner for Landon this Friday. Just close family, nothing big." I stared at it for a full 10 seconds. Engagement dinner. Last I heard, Landon was still figuring things out with some woman named Maya. I'd never met her, and now they were engaged. And Mom was holding a private dinner without me. I texted back, "So I'm not invited." Her response came instantly. Too instantly. "It's just a little thing, Sam, nothing formal, just a toast. We'll do something bigger later." Something inside me twisted. I've always been the first one they called. When someone needed a ride to the ER, when Dad needed help lifting heavy furniture, when Landon forgot his dog's vet appointment and needed someone to drive the poor thing last minute. But suddenly I didn't qualify as close family. I didn't argue, I just texted okay, but the words sat like a stone in my stomach. All week I debated confronting her, or ignoring it, or showing up anyway. I'd noticed other signs lately, too. Family group chats I'd quietly been removed from Mom being evasive about Christmas plans, Dad acting like I was made of glass whenever I visited. Something was off, and it wasn't just the dinner. Friday came. I finished work at 5 and sat in my car for half an hour staring at my phone like it was a dare. Mom's last text, just a little thing, kept echoing in my mind. Finally, I opened Maps, typed in their address, and drove. I didn't call, didn't text. If it really was a tiny dinner, I'd walk in, feel silly, and apologize for overreacting. But the moment I pulled onto their street, the world tilted. Cars lined the block. Not a small dinner, not even a medium one. A full-scale event. My throat closed around something sharp. I parked a block away, suddenly unsure if I wanted to be seen at all. The porch light glowed, music drifted through the walls, and laughter, loud, collective, unrestrained, spilled out the windows like steam from a boiling pot. I knocked, no answer. I rang the bell, still nothing. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I used my key. Inside, the sound hit me like a wave, a real party, catered tables, decorations. She said yes balloons, a slideshow of Landon and Maya laughing across their curated digital life. Every aunt, uncle, cousin, and second cousin once removed, everyone was there. Except me. People brushed past me like I was invisible. Mom's face faltered when she finally saw me. Her smile slipped for half a heartbeat before she slapped it back on. Samantha, you came. You said it was just a small thing, I said. Oh, well, it sort of snowballed. You know how your Aunt Lydia is, she insisted. I stopped listening, because across the room Landon stood in a white suit jacket, champagne in hand, smirking. Smug. Unbothered. Like my absence had been intentional. It probably was. I was about to turn and leave when a small tug grabbed my attention. Sam, Jake Landon's 8-year-old son, ran toward me, grinning wide cheeks flushed with excitement. I crouched down. Didn't think I'd see you tonight, I said softly. He leaned in, lowered his voice to a whisper, and slid a small envelope into the inside pocket of my coat. Mom told me to give you this. I froze. What is it? But he was already running off. My heartbeat quickened, thudding too hard against my ribs. I slipped away from the crowd, walked to the downstairs bathroom, locked the door, and opened the envelope. And what I saw made my whole body go cold. My hands shook, my thoughts scattered, and something inside me snapped into clarity. 10 minutes later, I walked back into the living room, smiling like nothing was wrong. Then I slipped the envelope into someone else's bag. The first warning sign wasn't the envelope. It was how easily the party swallowed my return. Back in the living room, I stood near the far wall, holding a glass of soda. I hadn't taken a sip from watching people drift through the house like nothing had happened. My pulse thudded hard enough that I could feel it in my palms. My smile felt glued on. My lungs were working too fast. But no one, absolutely no one, noticed. Then the knock came. Sharp, authoritative, impossible to ignore. I think the police are here," someone near the door said. The music faltered before cutting off completely. Conversation stuttered into silence. It was like the house inhaled and forgot how to breathe. Guests froze in place, clutching champagne flutes midair. Someone whispered my brother's name. Someone else muttered, "What's going on?" I stayed exactly where I was, near the back of the room, watching, waiting. 2 officers stepped inside, a man and a woman, both with calm, controlled expressions. "Sorry to interrupt," the female officer said. "We're looking for a Mr. Landon Vasquez." All eyes shifted toward him. Landon raised a hand, smiling like this was some kind of misunderstanding he could charm his way out of. "I'm Landon." The officers approached, lowering their voices in that restrained, measured tone that implied they wanted cooperation, not escalation. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments. Anonymous call, matching serial numbers, possession of stolen property. Landon blinked fast. "Wait, what? I don't even—" He reached instinctively toward the messenger bag he'd left on a dining chair. "Sir," the male officer said, raising a hand, "we need to take a look inside your bag." Landon swallowed hard. My bag. His fiancée, Maya, went pale. Her glass of champagne trembled visibly in her hand. She didn't speak. She just stared at the bag like she was afraid of what was inside. Landon unzipped it. His hands weren't steady. He pulled out a phone charger, a planner, a set of keys, then froze. "What the hell is this?" He held up the envelope. My envelope. The one that had been slipped into my coat. The one I moved quietly, calmly, intentionally. A ripple went through the room. Shock, confusion, curiosity. The kind that spreads fast when a family's skeletons spill out in public. Inside the envelope were 5 crisp $100 bills and a tiny Ziploc bag. White powder. Small, but unmistakable. Someone gasped. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone else muttered, "Oh my God." Landon stared around the room like one of us would laugh and tell him it was a prank. But no one did. "I swear to God that's not mine," he said. He looked to Maya. "Babe." That was when she found her voice. She pointed straight at me. It was her. The room shifted sharply toward me. "She put something in your bag," Landon, Maya insisted. "I saw her." I blinked once, then laughed, not a joyful laugh, but a low, breathless, disbelieving sound that came out of me like steam escaping a cracked kettle. "You saw me," I asked slowly. "You saw me, from across the house. Put something in his bag." "Yes," Maya snapped. "Interesting," I said. "You weren't even inside the house then. You were outside taking pictures with your friends. You posted them 10 minutes ago. Instagram story." Her mouth dropped open, then closed, then opened again. She had nothing. The female officer stepped toward me. "Ma'am, do you mind coming with us for a moment?" "Not at all," I said. They guided me toward the foyer away from the crowd. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw several guests subtly lifting their phones to record. That was fine. I had done nothing wrong. And I wanted witnesses. The female officer spoke first. "Would you mind telling us how you came into contact with that envelope?" I nodded. "My nephew gave it to me." Both officers glanced at each other. Your nephew? Jake, I said. 8 years old. He slipped it into my coat and whispered, Mom told me to give you this. The mail officer scribbled a note. And you opened it. In the bathroom, I said. When I saw what was inside, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I figured it was a setup. A setup, the female officer repeated. I nodded. I wasn't even invited to this party. My mother told me it was just a small family dinner. I arrived and found half the extended family here, and then I'm handed an envelope full of cash and drugs. The officer raised her eyebrows slightly, not doubting me, assessing me, recognizing something she'd seen before in other families with pretty houses and ugly secrets. She closed her notepad. We're going to run tests on the substance. At this moment, neither you nor Mr. Vasquez is under arrest. Behind her, the house had deflated into anxious murmurs. The playlist had switched to a soft indie song about heartbreak playing awkwardly in the background. We'll be in touch, the officer said before leaving. As soon as the door closed behind them, Maya slipped away upstairs. Landon sank onto the porch steps outside, head in his hands. Half the guests began leaving, muttering excuses, avoiding eye contact. The cake stayed uncut. Mom found me in the kitchen, her voice a tight whisper. What were you thinking? I stared at her. What was I thinking? You humiliated your brother, she hissed. You ruined his engagement dinner. My mouth fell open. I ruined it. I nearly got framed, and you're angry at me. She flinched, but recovered instantly. Landon would never. He already did, I snapped. And deep down, you know it. Her expression flickered a microsecond crack in the mask she'd worn my entire childhood. Mom, I said softly but sharply, you've enabled him his whole life. And I've been the spare tire in the trunk. Good enough only when things go wrong. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. I walked past her through the crowd of people pretending not to stare, past the untouched champagne flutes, past the glittering future Mrs. Vasquez banner. At the door, Jake found me again, his little hand wrapped around mine. Aunt Sam, he whispered wide-eyed. Did I do something wrong? My heart broke. I knelt. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just the messenger. He nodded solemnly. I know. Mom said it was a funny joke. A funny joke. Of course she did. I hugged him. For him. For me. For everything I'd held inside for 28 years. Then I left the house, feeling cold, feeling angry, feeling like the ground under my feet had shifted forever. Because deep down I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. In the days after the engagement party, everything around me went unnervingly quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Not healing quiet. The kind of silence that comes after someone has slammed a door and walked away. My phone stayed dark. No family group chat notifications. No calls from Mom. Not even one of Dad's awkward, hesitant check-ins. It felt like the entire household I grew up in had turned its back simultaneously, as if ignoring me was a solution. But Landon wasn't silent everywhere. His social media lit up the way it always did when he wanted sympathy without accountability. He posted quotes about betrayal and loyalty, dramatic as always. One picture showed him and Maya holding hands at the beach with the caption, "You and me against the world." He looked tense behind the smile. She looked like a woman trying too hard to look supportive. Meanwhile, I kept replaying the engagement night like it was stuck on a loop. Jake's trembling voice in my ear. Mom's disappointment sharp as a slap, Landon pointing the finger without hesitation. It didn't stop there. My boss pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay at home. People at work whispered when I passed. Even my landlord raised the rent with the oily smile of someone who assumed I was too exhausted to fight it. Then the police called. The powder in the envelope wasn't sugar, it wasn't flour, it was real. Not enough to lock anyone up instantly, but enough to matter enough to ruin someone if used right. Enough to ruin me, if that was the plan. When the officer said the words, my heart thudded so hard it felt like I'd swallowed a stone. I kept my voice steady because panic would only make me look guilty. But when the call ended, my knees nearly buckled. This had never been a prank. Someone wanted me buried. I went to my coat, the one Jake had slipped the envelope into, and ran my hand along the inside pocket. Something felt off, a faint crinkle beneath a loose seam. Carefully, I pulled at the edge until a folded slip of paper fell into my hand. Not just any paper. A cash withdrawal receipt from Landon's account. Same day as the party. Same amount, $500. And on the back, scribbled quickly like he wrote it in a rush, but still wanted me to read it clearly. Sam, final warning. The world seemed to tilt. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't feel anything at first, just a cold, precise certainty settling into place. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't panic. This wasn't Maya acting alone. This was something Landon orchestrated deliberately, a warning meant to keep me quiet, a warning I wasn't meant to find. Instead of falling apart, I found a strange stillness inside myself. Not calm focus. If he thought this would intimidate me into staying silent, he didn't know me at all. Days passed and the family freeze-out continued. No one asked if I was okay. No one wondered how I felt, being accused, being set up. They just closed ranks around Landon like they always did. I'd spent my whole life being the one who didn't need attention, and now that they needed to sacrifice someone, I was the easiest to throw into the fire. One night, sitting alone in my apartment surrounded by quiet that felt more like exile, something inside me whispered a word I hadn't heard from myself in years. Enough. I changed my number the next morning. It felt petty for 5 seconds, then liberating for hours. The silence that followed wasn't punishment anymore. It was freedom. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my woodworking tools. Before I became the reliable problem solver in my family, I used to build things with my hands. Tables, shelves, small things that held real weight. I cleaned out my garage, bought a couple of secondhand tools, and started carving again. And I remembered myself. The rhythm soothed me. The sawdust on my hands grounded me. I opened a small Etsy shop and listed a few cutting boards. I didn't expect anything. When one sold within 24 hours, I cried not because of the money, but because it made me feel like I still had worth outside of a family that only valued me when they needed something. I reinvested every dollar, bought better tools, took custom orders. A woman asked me to carve her late husband's initials into a bench. When she picked it up, she cried with gratitude. It made me realize I could build more than furniture. I could build a life outside the shadow of Landon's chaos. I didn't reach out to my family. Not yet. Not ever if they didn't deserve it. But then another thread unraveled. One afternoon, while smoothing the edges of a walnut tabletop, a new email notification appeared. The subject line was vague, confidential inquiry. The message was short. You may want to look into your brother Landon's recent financial activities. Attached is a preliminary report. No signature, no explanation. Attached was a document, sparse, clinical, devastating. Over $10,000 in small, consistent cash withdrawals. Deposits made under names that didn't belong to him. Money transferred to an account in another state. Timing that lined up almost perfectly with the engagement party and the envelope. As I scrolled, the cold inside me spread like frost. This wasn't sloppiness. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't Landon being reckless. This was strategy. He wasn't trying to warn me. He was preparing a fall guy. Me. My throat tightened as everything clicked into place, the envelope, the lies, the tension, the exile. The engagement party wasn't a celebration. It was camouflage, a backdrop, a setting for a staged downfall. I didn't shake. I didn't panic. I simply closed the laptop and exhaled slowly. If Landon wanted a war, he had finally chosen someone who wouldn't surrender. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't want to walk away. I wanted the truth, and I would get it. I didn't know what I expected when I opened the investigative report again the next morning, but the more I stared at it, the more the pattern emerged like a bruise under the skin. The withdrawals weren't random. The deposits weren't clumsy. The transfers across state lines weren't careless. They were deliberate, coordinated, planned. Landon wasn't drowning and flailing for help. He was swimming confidently toward something or away from something, and he needed someone else to take the blame for the wake he left behind. And that someone was me. Once the realization settled, I couldn't unsee it. Every memory of him playing the helpless son, the misunderstood artist, the golden child who just needed a little help twisted into something darker. Landon wasn't just impulsive. He wasn't just irresponsible. He was dangerous in ways none of us had ever wanted to admit. I printed every page of the report, spread them across my kitchen table, and stared at the mess of numbers, signatures, and timestamps. It was like looking at a jigsaw puzzle designed to make me question my own sanity. Then, halfway through the stack, something new caught my eye. A business registration form. The name listed Velvet Harvest Catering, a company I had never heard Landon mention in his entire life. The primary contact email on the form wasn't his, and it wasn't Maya's. It was an email that looked disturbingly familiar. Same first name as mine, same last initial, same string of numbers. Except one letter was different. It wasn't my email, but it could have fooled anyone glancing at it quickly or any automated system processing a digital signature. My stomach turned. Landon hadn't just used my name casually. He'd created a ghost version of me. an evil twin in email form, a digital puppet he could put his hand inside whenever he needed someone else to sign something he didn't want linked to his name. I checked the domain registration for the business website. The contact information listed the same fake email. The IP address pulled from the logs pointed to Landon's house. My hands tightened on the table's edge. He hadn't just implicated me by accident. He was building a case step by step, slowly, confidently, expecting I'd never check, expecting I'd stay quiet, expecting I'd keep playing the role he'd assigned me since childhood. The reliable one, the quiet one, the one who never challenged him. He was counting on me being the easiest person in the world to erase. I sat down, hard breath, catching adrenaline crawling through my veins. No, not this time. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to a cafe 2 miles away, the kind of place with chipped tiles and 2 loud espresso machines. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't family, someone who saw Landon from the outside, someone who had been pulled into the same orbit of deceit. Max. Landon's fiancée. I sent him a message. He responded almost immediately. Please, I need answers too. We agreed to meet in an hour. When I walked into the cafe, the weather outside looked like it wanted to rain but couldn't fully commit. Max was already seated, his elbows on the table, staring into a cup he wasn't drinking from. He looked exhausted, hollow around the eyes. When he saw me, he stood too quickly, like someone bracing for impact. Samantha, he said, voice strained. Thank you for coming. I sat across from him. I didn't do any of this, I said softly, and I think you know that. His throat worked as he swallowed. I do now. Wordlessly, I slid the folder of documents across the table, printed reports, bank statements, domain logs, screenshots of the ghost email. As he flipped through each page, the color drained from his face. She used my name, he whispered. And yours. For paperwork I've never even seen. She forged the digital signatures, I said. Probably used the fake version of my email to click approve or sign. Half these forms only require an email verification. He pressed his palms against his eyes. She told me her mother helped fund the business. Velvet Harvest. She said the startup costs were covered. That's interesting, I said coolly, because Mom still panics about giving Landon $20 for gas. Max let out a broken laugh, bitter disbelieving. Why would he do this, he asked. Why drag us into something criminal? He wasn't dragging us, I said. He was paving a runway to dump everything on us when the business collapsed. He stared at me, and I saw the exact moment the truth clicked into place. Velvet Harvest wasn't a business, it was an exit strategy. I'm sorry, Max whispered. I should have seen it. I wanted to believe he was good underneath. I nodded. We all did. The cafe's shaky ceiling fan rattled overhead as if emphasizing how flimsy our illusions had been. What do we do now? Max asked. We build a case, I said. We make sure Landon can't twist this onto either of us. So for the next several days, Max dug into his emails, his bank statements, even old text messages. We compared everything with the investigator's report. He found 3 business contracts with signatures that clearly weren't his. 1 email thread where Landon forgot to impersonate him properly, switching from Max's tone to his own halfway through. Sloppy, but enough to prove intent. When we finally had a pile of evidence thick enough to choke someone, I contacted a lawyer. Carolyn, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, recommended by one of my woodworking clients. I laid everything out for her, the envelope, the fake email, the business scam, the digital signatures. She listened in silence, then sat back in her chair. Samantha, she said, your brother didn't just make poor choices. He committed fraud, identity theft, and he attempted to implicate you in possession of an illegal substance. She tapped the stack of papers. This isn't chaos. This is calculated. I swallowed hard. So how do we stop him? We don't stop him, Carolyn said. We let the truth do it. She outlined the plan with clinical precision. Sworn affidavits, notarized statements, evidence, submissions to the bank, to the state, and when the timing was right, to the authorities. Quiet moves, strategic ones. It felt surreal. Part of me still wanted to believe this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that Landon would call and explain, apologize, cry promise to fix it. But that part of me was shrinking fast. We began filing evidence. Max submitted his statement. I submitted mine. I secured my bank accounts, froze my credit, changed passwords, set up 2-factor authentication on everything. It felt less like protecting my identity and more like reclaiming it. And when all the pieces were finally in place, Carolyn said the words that made my heart hammer in my chest. The last step, she said calmly, is to confront him. On your terms. I stared at her. My terms. She nodded. You need to see how he reacts. and we need him to implicate himself. I wasn't sure I had the stomach for it, but the new version of me, the one forged in betrayal and clarity, did. So I crafted one final move, a trap. Not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to protect Landon. I was protecting myself, and I was just getting started. I didn't sleep the night before the mixer. My tools sat in neat rows across the workbench. My laptop glowed with open windows of registration forms and templates, and my mind kept replaying the same question. How did it come to this? How did I end up planning a trap for my own brother? But every time doubt crept in. The memory of Jake slipping that envelope into my coat snapped me back into focus. The fear in his voice, the casual cruelty of Landon's final warning, the realization that I had nearly been framed publicly, humiliatingly, permanently. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. So I rented a small community center hall for one evening, the kind used for neighborhood meetings and children's birthday parties with cheap carpet and humming fluorescent lights. I marketed it as a local artisan's networking mixer, printed a few half-believable flyers, created an email newsletter with stock photos of woodworking tools and smiling craft vendors, and sent out invitations to a handful of real small business owners who wouldn't care if the event was a dud. But the invitation I needed to be accepted went out differently. I called Mom. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "I'm doing something with my woodworking. Just a small get-together. Nothing formal. Local makers, networking, that sort of thing. Can you tell Landon I don't want things to feel weird?" Silence on her end. A sharp inhale. Then, "Oh, Sam, that's wonderful. I'll let him know." Perfect. Landon couldn't resist an audience. He couldn't resist being seen. He couldn't resist pretending to support me publicly if it made him look good. And underestimating me was practically his favorite hobby. I spent the day of the mixer setting up tables, arranging fake sign-in sheets, and looping a slideshow on a borrowed projector, showing my projects, half of which were actually stock images edited to look like my work. It didn't matter. The mixer wasn't for the guests. It was for him. As the clock approached 6, a few local craft hobbyists trickled in, giving me polite smiles, nibbling crackers, wandering from table to table with mild interest. They didn't know the event had a second purpose, a darker gravity pulling beneath the surface, waiting for one specific person to arrive. Then, 30 minutes late, of course, Landon walked in. Not alone. He arrived with the swagger he always used when he wanted to pretend he had everything under control, wearing a pale blue blazer and holding a coffee he clearly bought just so people would think he was busy and important. Maya wasn't with him. I suspected she didn't want to be in the same room as me ever again. Landon's smile was wide performative. "Sam, wow. Look at this. You really did it." I smiled politely. "Glad you came." He strutted through the room like a politician shaking hands at a fundraiser, nodding appreciatively at the displays, asking questions he didn't listen to the answers of, pretending to care. His performance was almost flawless if you didn't know him. But I did. He was nervous. His eyes kept flicking toward me. His jaw worked a little too hard when he smiled. The cracks were already showing. After looping around the room twice, he finally cornered me near the refreshments table. "You know," he said casually, sipping from his cup, "I've been thinking. Maybe we should partner on something." I raised an eyebrow. "Partner? Sure." He gestured to my displays. "You've got the hands-on skill. I've got business connections. We could expand. Get investors. Maybe franchise." Franchise. He actually said franchise. It hit me then. He wasn't here to support me. He was here to test how much of me he could still control, whether I would slip back into being useful. The last time I let him help, he nearly destroyed my life. I kept my expression neutral. "That's interesting, Landon." He smiled like he'd won something. "But before we talk business, I said there's something you need to see." I handed him a folder. Not the one with evidence strong enough to sink him, but a different one. This one was empty, except for a few blank pages, but it looked official enough to scare someone who knew they had reason to be scared. He opened it. His eyes flicked through the empty pages, then snapped up to mine. "What is this?" "You tell me," I murmured. "Since you've been forging my signature on business documents, creating a ghost email account in my name, attempting to pin fraudulent loans on me, and oh, right, framing me with drugs at your engagement party." The color drained from his face. "That is not Sam. Are you joking?" He scoffed, voice cracking. "You're being paranoid. You're making stuff up because you're jealous." I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "Landon, I'm not here to argue. I'm giving you a chance." "A chance for what?" "To walk away. to stop before things get worse, to come clean before everything comes crashing down. He threw the folder onto the table between us. You're bluffing. I smiled, not cruel, just tired. Then watch me. The moment stretched tight and breathless. A few guests glanced over, sensing tension, but not understanding the scale of what they were witnessing. Landon's facade finally cracked. Anger flickered across his face, followed by something like fear. Real fear, as he realized I wasn't joking, wasn't playing, wasn't the little sister he could dismiss with a laugh anymore. He turned sharply and stormed out of the hall, his blazer flaring behind him as if he were trying to make the most dramatic exit possible. He didn't look back, and he didn't say goodbye. But I noticed something he probably didn't intend to reveal. He didn't deny anything. Not one part of it. The next morning, Carolyn filed the official complaint with the district attorney's office. Everything went in Max's affidavit, the screenshots of forged signatures, the financial trail, the investigator's report, and most damning of all, the fingerprints on the bag of powder. The police had tested them. Not mine, not Max's, not Jake's. Landon's. It took less than 48 hours for things to accelerate. Investigators connected the fraudulent catering business to Landon's banking activity. They saw the attempted entrapment. They saw the intent. They saw the pattern. And Landon's carefully constructed world, the world he had built on manipulation, charm, and the assumption that I'd always stay quiet, began to collapse. He didn't know it yet, but I did. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being dragged into a storm. I was the one walking out of it. Landon wasn't arrested in some dramatic flashing lights spectacle. There were no sirens echoing down the street, no crowds gathering to watch. Instead, it happened on a quiet Monday morning, the kind of morning where the sun comes up slowly and the world feels half asleep. I heard through a neighbor, not through family, of course. Word spreads fast in small towns, especially when the golden child's shine finally cracks. 2 detectives knocked on Landon's apartment door at 8:12 a.m. He opened it wearing a robe, holding a half-finished cup of coffee, probably expecting the day to follow his usual pattern charm, excuses, avoidance. Instead, he found himself face-to-face with consequences. He didn't fight. At least that's what the neighbor said. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just froze like a puppet whose strings had been cut. They read him his rights. Maya wasn't there. She had moved out 2 weeks before, leaving nothing behind but a short letter on the kitchen counter. I saw a photo of the note later sent to me by Max. I wanted to believe in us, but you made belief impossible. I hope someday Jake understands why I had to leave. He deserves better. Goodbye. The moment I read it, a tight knot formed in my chest. Not sympathy, not vindication. Something quieter. Something close to grief for a woman who had walked into Landon's orbit thinking she could fix him something I'd spent years learning couldn't be done. My phone lit up that afternoon. Mom. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Sam. Her voice was brittle, fragile. Like every word hurt. I didn't know she whispered. About any of it. The business, the withdrawals, the drugs. I swear to you, I didn't know. I closed my eyes. But you knew enough. Silence stretched thin between us. She took a shaky breath. I thought if I ignored the worst parts, he would grow out of them. That if I protected him long enough, he'd finally be okay. He didn't grow out of them, I said quietly. He grew deeper into them. And you didn't protect him. You enabled him. Mom didn't argue. For the first time, she didn't defend him. Instead, she cried soft, broken, honest tears that weren't meant to manipulate anyone. Tears of a mother realizing she had failed one child by loving another too much. There was a pause. Then she said the words I never expected to hear. Sam. Jake can't stay with him. And I can't take care of a child. Not with my health. Not full time. I felt my breath hitch. Where is he? I asked. With a friend, she whispered. Only temporarily. Social services will step in soon if we don't. Her voice cracked. He needs someone. He needs family. The weight of it settled over me slowly like snowfall. The image of Jake that night, his small hand gripping mine, his wide eyes, his trembling whisper flashed through my mind. Are we going to your place now? Can I help you build something? My throat tightened. I'll take him, I said. Mom broke then fully. But it wasn't grief for Landon anymore. It was relief. Relief that someone would do what needed to be done. Relief that someone in this family would finally truly show up for an innocent child caught in the middle of an adult mess. Jake moved in 2 days later. He didn't bring much, just a backpack of clothes, a toothbrush, and a drawing he'd made at school. Of a crooked little house with 2 stick figures inside, one tall, one small. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, he'd written, "Me plus Aunt Sam." He didn't ask about his father that first night. Didn't ask where he was or when he was coming back. Kids are smarter than people think. They feel storms before they understand them. Instead, he put his backpack down, walked into the living room, and said, "Can I help you build something tomorrow?" I smiled. "Yeah, buddy. You can help me build everything." The next few weeks were healing in ways I didn't expect. Jake fell in love with the workshop immediately. He learned to sand wood before he learned to spell mahogany. He'd sit beside me as I carved, asking endless questions, giving me suggestions that sometimes made sense and sometimes didn't, but were always earnest and sweet. I'd catch him humming to himself while painting toy boats. I'd catch myself smiling at him without meaning to. My woodworking business grew slowly but steadily. People liked that I called back, showed up on time, built things that lasted. A woman ordered a custom bookshelf for her reading corner. A couple wanted a carved oak coffee table. Someone else commissioned a memorial plaque. None of it made me rich, but for once it made me fulfilled. The fraud case moved forward with brutal efficiency. The evidence was overwhelming. Landon's fingerprints on the bag of powder. The ghost email registered at his IP address. The forged digital signatures. The transfers. The withdrawals. The attempted setup. He eventually took a plea deal 18 months with possible early release after a year. When the judge described his actions as calculated and disturbingly manipulative, I felt something subtle inside me shift. Not joy, not triumph. Just release. Jake didn't mention his dad's name until December. We were decorating a small pine tree I'd carved from leftover scraps, beautifully imperfect, tilted slightly to one side, the way handmade things always are. He hung a paper star on top, then turned to me. "Is Dad going to visit for Christmas?" I crouched beside him. "Not this year, sweetheart." He looked down for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." A few seconds passed. Then he said something that hit me harder than any accusation, any police call, any betrayal. "Can we still send him something?" My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said softly. "We can do that." We wrote a card together. Jake drew a snowman smiling too big. He signed his name in block letters. When he handed it to me, I added 2 words under his drawing. "Be better." We mailed it on Christmas Eve. The family didn't come around immediately. They didn't know how. Some backed away, unsure where to place their loyalty. Some avoided me entirely, terrified of being associated with the truth. But a few reached out in small, surprising ways. Dad sent me a simple email. "You did what none of us could." Aunt Lydia delivered cookies and a handwritten note. "You're a better person than most." Mom showed up once a week, always with something for Jake, a book, a puzzle, a small wooden figurine she thought he'd like. She never overstayed. She never pushed. She just tried. One afternoon, she asked quietly, "Do you hate me?" I didn't rush. I didn't soften the truth. "No, but I don't trust you yet." She nodded. "That's fair." A pause. "Thank you for not turning your back on him." I looked at Jake on the floor, building a little wooden truck with pieces he'd cut himself, his tongue sticking out in concentration, his eyes shining with pride. "Jake saved me too," I said. And I meant it. It's strange how the biggest moments in life don't always feel big when they happen. Sometimes they come quietly, like a soft knock instead of a slammed door, or a whisper instead of a scream. That's how it felt the day Jake and I finished our biggest woodworking project yet. A bench. Nothing glamorous, nothing complex, just a solid piece of reclaimed oak, sanded smooth, treated with care, carved with intention. Jake picked the wood himself, a rough, scarred piece that looked like it had lived a life before it ever came to us. He said he liked pieces with history. Things that have been through something, he added almost shyly. I knew what he meant. We spent weeks on it. Jake insisted on helping with every step, measuring, sanding, clamping, brushing on the varnish, with slow, careful strokes. He worked beside me silently most days, humming under his breath, occasionally asking if I thought his dad would ever build something like this. I always answered the same. Everyone can build something good if they really want to. He seemed satisfied with that. When the bench was finally finished, we stepped back to look at it. Wide, stable, heavy enough that it wouldn't wobble, even if someone angry enough tried to shake it. It looked honest, like something that couldn't be moved easily, couldn't be faked, couldn't be bent into shape by charm or manipulation. Jake ran his fingers across the engraving we'd designed together. Carved in careful lettering along the front edge, "Truth holds, lies collapse." He read it out loud slowly. "I like that," he said. "Me too." For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. Then Jake turned to me. Can we give it away? I blinked. Give it away. Yeah, he said simply. Someone else needs it more than we do. A lump formed in my throat, the kind that sneaks up on you. He meant it with all the earnestness in the world. No hesitation, no pride, no sense of ownership. Just a desire to share something good. Yeah, I said, we can do that. We donated the bench to the courthouse downtown, the same one where I'd once sat trembling, wondering if anyone would ever believe me, wondering if I would spend my life living under the shadow of someone else's lies. They placed it in the waiting room, right near the front. The day we delivered it, Jake and I stood together staring at our creation in its new home, parents, lawyers, nervous defendants, all shuffling through unaware of what they stood beside, unaware of the small piece of truth carved into the wood. Jake slipped his hand into mine. Do you think Dad will ever see it? He asked. I swallowed. Maybe. Do you want him to? The question hit me harder than I expected. Did I want Landon to sit there someday reading the words we carved? Did I want him to feel the weight of them? Did I want him to know that while his lies had crumbled, something stronger had risen in their place? I squeezed Jake's hand. I want him to be better, I said finally. For you. Jake nodded, a small thoughtful nod. Me too. We stood there together for a long time, long enough that the clerk behind the counter smiled at us, long enough that people came and went without knowing they were passing a monument built from pain survival and stubborn hope. Long enough for me to realize something I hadn't understood before. I wasn't rebuilding my life, I was building a new one, and I wasn't building it alone. Over the next few months, things shifted slowly, subtly, the way healing always does. Mom kept her weekly visits. She asked permission before entering my home. She apologized without prompting. She listened more. She defended less. She became softer around the edges, not fragile, just honest for the first time in years. Dad sent a few more emails. Short, awkward, heartfelt. He was trying too. Landon wrote once from prison, a letter addressed to Jake, but clearly meant for me to read first. It wasn't manipulative, it wasn't defensive, it wasn't self-pitying. Just a single paragraph. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry for all of it. If I ever get out and you'll let me, I want to try again. Not to be who I was, but someone Jake can be proud of. Jake read it, folded it carefully, put it in a little tin he kept his treasures in. We can try, he said quietly. And that was that. Not a promise, not a reconciliation, just space for possibility. One evening, months after everything had settled into a new normal, Jake came into the workshop dragging a pile of scrap wood behind him. Aunt Sam, he said breathless, can we build a table? Like, a real one? I grinned. A real one, huh? Big project. He nodded vigorously, like for the dining room, for both of us. Something warm bloomed in my chest, a feeling I hadn't expected. Family. Yeah, I said, let's build a table. He beamed. And as we measured and marked the first pieces together, I realized the truth. Landon's lies didn't collapse my life. They cleared the space for me to build something stronger, something honest, something steady, something mine. And seated across from me, covered in sawdust, humming softly as he worked, was the best thing I'd ever built.